command a great and terrible army. We will sail to 1 billion worlds until every light has been extinguished.
What is up, everybody? Starscream here, and today we are going to be doing a top 10 list. I haven't done one of these in like 50 years, so I figure enough time had passed that enough stuff had changed. Was I just like phonetically sounding out the word change? Enough stuff had changed that I could warrant doing another one of these. A top 10 list, just like I mentioned in the other video, which you should go watch if you haven't watched it. A top 10 list is a little bit hard to do just because it's really subjective. It's everybody's opinion, and different factors can lead to different rankings on a list, whether they're good at PvP or PvE, whether you have their epic, whether they're fully ascended, and whatever. So a couple of disclaimers I'm going to mention, like I do in my other video, is that I lean more heavily towards PvP viability. Some of them I will mention are really, really good for PvP and PvE, or like PvE style events, a la, boss invasion or lunar events or something like that. That said, I am going to assume that you have them fully ascended, that you have them max stars, and that sometimes you have their epics. Now, the good thing about the list is that only a couple of them really matter if you have their epic or not. But like I said, these are all my opinion. You can have your own opinion, but odds are most people will agree with at least my top 10, if not the order, right? So if you have any questions about this, make sure to ask them in the comments below. And before we get started, please make sure to leave me a like if you do end up liking the video at the end. Leave a comment, let me know what you think. Subscribe if you're not subscribed, and then consider becoming a member if you would like to help support the channel. So without further ado, let's get started. Coming in at number 10 is definitely one of the ugliest mugs in the game, Mikko the Marvelous. I did consider him to be pretty terrible before when he first came out, but nowadays he's pretty awesome. He has really, really good synergies with Bramble, Gretel. Even though Bramble and Gretel, in my opinion, are not that great, they do make Mikko a lot stronger, and Bramble did get a revamp so that he's not complete trash tier. His Mikko the Marvelous's chaotic bounce can do a bazillion attacks at once, can freeze the enemies, and his really only downfall is that he can miss, and that he's pretty squishy and dies pretty easy. But other than that, he's a really, really solid hero, especially to have on defense, especially if you want to have people probably skip you on defense because they just don't want to deal with the uncertainty of his attacks. Also, he does have an epic now. Most of us don't have it because, unless you're Bill Gates, you probably don't have it. And apparently epic weapons don't become free ever anymore. So who knows if I'll ever have it or not. But regardless, he still is able to break into the top 10. Number 9 on our list is Sybil, everybody's favorite chameleon, I think. He's definitely a chameleon. Look at those eyes. Sybil is pretty good. He does really, really decent damage. He's fast. He has synergy with the alrakis for some reason. I'm not really sure what their deal is, but I guess he's a tainted lizard. I don't know, who knows? But anyways, his first attack can't miss. He does really, really great damage. He steals buffs, gives buffs to your team. If you let him survive for a while, he can be pretty dangerous, and he pretty much survives almost always through the first round. So definitely consider getting him or starring him up if you haven't already, and then eventually in about 5 years when his epic becomes free, you should definitely make sure to get that as well. His main advantage, in my opinion, over somebody like Mikko is that his first ability does not miss, and he also doesn't really rely on other heroes to make himself good. He can work with a multitude of different teams, but obviously you're probably going to want to use him on a team that focuses on chaos damage like alrakis. Coming in at number 8 is a roly doughboy grandeur. Grandeur, like I mentioned in the last top 10 video, is just a great utility hero. He blocks debuffs from your allies. He can block your allies from being targeted. He's super, super hard to kill, especially with new heroes like Thrax. And best of all, he stops follow-up attacks from people like Nivias. He does have an epic. It is free to get. I know, surprise. It is free to get, and I definitely do recommend starring him up, making sure that he's ascended, and getting his epic eventually. Coming in at number 7 is going to be probably a contested placement, but for me it's going to be Archon. Archon right now is in a weird spot because he's like he's basically necessary for what I would consider to be the best PvP attack team. But the reason I can't put him higher is because aside from that attack team, he's really doesn't bring a lot more to the table in other regards. So in PvE, he's basically useless, and in PvP, he's great, but he's great for one thing, and that's pretty much it. And if he doesn't get the job done with his one thing, then he's, you know, he's almost a wasted spot. That one thing is going to be his third special move, which is called cataclysmic conflagration, the one where he explodes. So when he explodes, he takes away enemy bodies, he does tons and tons of damage, but if it doesn't clear the enemy team, you've just now lost one of your heroes. That said, he usually is pretty successful at taking out the enemy heroes if you do have enough, if you have good enough runes on him, and if you've done enough prior damage to the enemy team. The problem is it does nothing to Nivias unless Nivias is already dead, and that's kind of like the main thing that you want to be able to tackle right now in PvP offense are opposing Niviases. That said, he is still really, really amazing. He usually will wipe out most teams, so I definitely think he's better than the people before him. But aside from that, I can't in good conscience personally put him above the people that I'm about to name. Coming in at number 6 is going to be Agnon. Look, Agnon is just, there's not much to say about him. He's completely disgusting. He's super, super strong. I made a whole video that was, I didn't even talk in it. I just literally just beat people up solo Agnon against defenses. Now, it's a little bit harder with the current meta, defense meta, but still, Agnon absolutely carries in PvP. He's super, super good. Starts in stone form. He could be healed. He's immune to debuffs. His epic is, I should preface, his epic is the reason that he is so high on this list, because his epic is what allows you to stone enemy defenders. So for those of you that have been living under a rock, if you put enabler runes on him, you can guarantee his epic attack, and his epic attack, as long as it connects with an enemy, will turn them to stone, which will effectively take them out of the fight. And then unless they get rezzed, or unless they have an alrakis that, you know, kills you at the end of each turn or what have you, you've pretty much won the match, as long as you can just wait it out a couple turns, even if you were originally losing. Agnon can easily 1v3, 1v4 certain teams. He's just amazing. The thing is, I can't put him higher on this list because he also doesn't give a ton to his team. He's kind of a lone ranger. He's a solo carry type hero, and you know, he's not adding a ton of benefit to his team. He does give a little bit extra damage to other flying heroes against non-flying heroes, but it's really not that important for you to have that. It's definitely not something that really matters that much. But just from how incredibly powerful he is, even as a solo character, he's definitely deserves this spot on our top 10 list. Next on our list, coming in at number 5, is going to be probably another contested, debatable placement, but it's going to be Serenity for me. Serenity is, when I get asked on stream who the best heroes in the game are, I usually say Serenity, Dagon, and a couple others. That said, after really thinking about it, when I was making this list here, I kind of decided that the heroes that I have above Serenity really deserve the spot more than Serenity does, in my opinion. Now, let's talk about what's good about Serenity. Serenity gives tons and tons of damage reduction. In addition, she adds null magic to the enemy team. She also can help your team do extra attacks based on physical attacks that hit the enemy. So like your Dagon can attack twice, your Agnon can attack twice, and it ends up really helping the team out a lot. And it's definitely, Serenity is an absolute must-have hero, regardless of your level, regardless of, you know, if you're in Legend, PvP or not. She's just extremely powerful. in PvP especially, but can also help in PvE, especially in those later boss mode dungeons or boss islands or whatever the chaos islands or whatever. She definitely helps a lot there as well. So I personally, the only reason that I couldn't put her a little bit higher was because I don't think her epic is very good. It pretty much is just there to give her extra stats. It has an okay effect, but it's not that amazing. And I also don't think her abilities are that great. And by abilities, I mean her special abilities, not her passive traits. I think her actual special moves are not really that amazing. I find myself, if I'm bringing her on a team with other heroes like Agnon, for example, I find her just being there so that I can give my other teammates those extra hasted, let's just say, double attacks, and so that we can have null magic on the enemy team, which can mess up their defense or mess up their offense if you have her on defense. So, like I said, extremely, extremely good, but I do think the heroes that are above her definitely deserve the spots above her. Next on this list is going to be probably the hero I see complained about the most, at least in Gen Chat and in the chats of my streams, which is going to be Lorelei. I swear I can't remember the last hero besides maybe Rayla that has been complained more about than Lorelei. Lorelei is an absolute beast of a hero. She's extremely hard to kill. She can be, if ruined a certain way, she can be made extremely tanky. She also buffs flying heroes, which flying heroes are pretty much the best heroes right now. We're talking about Agnon, we're talking about Alrakis, Nivias, and then any of those heroes that aren't flying, her first ability makes flying. So those flying heroes can't get debuffs. They can't have buffs stolen from them. She's just ridiculous, and she heals an insane amount. She is by far easily the best healer in the game in terms of numbers. She's also probably the tankiest healer in the game, and she gives so many widespread buffs and just passive effects to her team that for me, she's like debatably, I would say up until about like 2 months ago, I would have put her probably as like the second best hero in the entire game. I do think that the current meta and the current landscape in the game is a little bit different, so I couldn't put her as high for this particular list. But 2 months ago, month and a half ago, I probably would have been putting her as probably number 2. But regardless, she's extremely good. If those of you are out there who don't have her maxed out or who are wondering, oh, who should I work on, definitely make sure that you prioritize this annoying little fairy. Well, we made it to the top 3, and number 3 for me is going to be the Bone Daddy himself, Alrakis. This is probably going to be up for debate, number 3 and number 2, but let's just talk about Alrakis for a second here, okay? First of all, Alrakis is by and large like one of the craziest heroes that's ever come. I don't see him going anywhere unless they make some insane changes to him, but he's just like I mentioned in my last top 10 video, and if you've been anywhere near PvP lately, you will see that he is absolutely everywhere, super overused, because he's disgustingly good. Anytime you get close to 3 rows worth of traits, you know something a little bit ridiculous is going on there, and that's definitely the case with Alrakis. He gives, let's go through this really quick. He gives his entire team tons of damage reduction. He gives himself damage reduction. He himself is flying. He does end of turn damage to the entire enemy team, whether he is alive or dead, and not just a little bit of damage, tons of damage, and not just regular damage, but chaos damage, which ends up being unavoidable. So it happens whether you want it to or not, and if you don't have a bunch of chaos reduction on your heroes, they're going to take ridiculous amounts of damage. In addition, his normal abilities in terms of his special attacks are all ridiculously good, not to mention his basic attack is a chaos attack, which can't be mitigated damage-wise. So if he does any follow-up attacks, or even if he's, somehow, let's just say, he's like silenced or whatever, he could still wipe out a whole team even just with his basic attack. I'd say his only drawback, literally his only drawback, would be that he's a little bit squishy if you're ruining him in a way to get maximum end of turn damage. But realistically, it doesn't really matter, because if he stays alive or if he dies, he's still annihilating the enemy team. That said, the reason he's number 3 and not in the 2 or number 1 spot is because I don't feel that he can work. How do I put this? So he can work on pretty much any team. But I don't think that he really adds tons of synergy or has I've never looked at a defense that only had alrakis on it and not certain other heroes and been like, oh man, I definitely want to avoid this defense. Whereas on the first place and second place hero on this top 10 list, sometimes when I look at defenses, I'm like, do I want to deal with this defense right now? Alrakis is really, really powerful, especially on offense, also on defense, but he's not quite as scary as the first 2 heroes on this list, which is why I had to put him in the number 3 spot instead of the number 2 or number 1 spot. Also, he does have an epic. Who knows if you'll ever be able to get it or not. I ended up getting it when it first came out just because of how much I was using him. Unfortunately, I don't really use him that much anymore, but I was using him a lot at the time, so that's why I got it. And that feels like, I'm pretty sure that was like 1996 when his epic came out, and we still haven't seen it be free, so who knows. But either way, even without his epic, he's still ridiculously good. I think pretty much everybody is over the dragon meta at this point just because he's so good that you're gonna see him all the time. Like I mentioned before, third place and second place were a hard decision, but Nivias for me definitely deserves this second place spot. Nivias is like if you took Solaris and made him like absolutely terrifying instead of just a flappy little bird. Nivias is so friggin' annoying on defense right now because so let's go through this really quick. He buffs other dragons. He takes away 10% of the enemy's health at the end of each turn. He will also revive if given enough time after he dies. Additionally, if he gets to use his first special ability, which is called Cold Summons, any dead dragons will come back to life at full health, and any other heroes will turn into these super ridiculous ice golems that, while they don't do that much damage themselves, when they explode, they make it so that Nivias follows up whoever they hit with their explosion, which was pretty much going to be everybody on your team unless they're still dodging for some reason, and he's going to do a follow-up attack with a basic attack and pretty much wipe out almost your entire team anytime that one of them explodes. The thing about Nivias is that makes him a little bit different than alrakis is that Nivias, like, if you don't take care of him like right away, your odds of winning go down drastically. If he's able to do his res and to do his follow-up attacks, you're like in a really bad spot. And while normally people are ruining alrakis to be very attack-based, Nivias is ruined the opposite. Usually Nivias is either a mix, like he's usually hybrid of attack and defense, or he's just made super tanky. So if you have it set up well enough, Nivias can avoid being hit. He can ensure that he reses everybody on his team, and then they all get to attack after they get resed by him. So it just ends up being an absolute nightmare. Right now, Nivias is the meta hero on defense. You will see him more than anybody except for the number 1 hero, which I think probably most of you have already guessed who that number 1 hero is. But aside from that hero, you're probably going to see him more than any other hero on defense. I'd say Nivias, if I had to guess, is like on 95% of all defense setups because he's just so ridiculous. He adds so much unpredictability to an attacker, and he's just really hard to deal with. I could also see him being good in PvE. I don't know. I haven't really used him that much in PvE. I hadn't had a reason to, but I can imagine that he would still be pretty decent in PvE just because, like I said, he can keep rezzing your team. If you make him tanky, he can survive long enough, and then if you bring him with dragons and people like Lorelei and stuff, he's just going to be an absolute nightmare to deal with for the enemy. Anyways, I'm really ready for Nivias to be gone, but as it stands, this guy is absolutely disgusting. All right, and we have arrived at the number 1 spot. For me, without question, the number 1 hero in the entire game is going to be Dagon. Now, I will say, in order for him to take this number 1 spot, he needs 2 things. He needs to have his epic completely maxed out, and he does need to have his storm forged epic skin. Let's just go through it. His damage output is absolutely unrivaled. He can do pretty much more damage than any other hero in the game. Whether he's with Valken or not, it doesn't matter who he's with, he will just completely annihilate an opposing team, even if they're super defensive, even if, regardless of what they're running, he's going to end up doing tons and tons of damage. Additionally, his epic skin gives him an extra life. So as soon as he's about to die, he does get his health all the way back to the top. And he also will get a buff called Mantle of the Storm, which makes it so that he takes no damage from ranged attacks for a turn. He also gives allied dwarves a buff. All allies gain 25% damage penetration, whether they're dwarves or not. But in addition, dwarves get an extra 10% chaos damage. His third special, Thunder Smash, can silence the entire enemy team. His first special, Electrified Whirlwind, takes away energy and does AoE, and is an AoE attack to everybody. His second special attack, Resounding Pounding, does 3 attacks on one enemy and will wipe out most enemies except for people like Grandeur or Thrax or something like that. His epic attack is ridiculous, is an AoE epic attack that's just like Pontifex except way better, and can shock or paralyze the enemy team, which can do things like make it so they can't attack, and people like Jinlei, for example, will also do follow-up attacks on all those, just adding more and more damage. Dagon, with his epic and with this ultimate skin, or whatever you want to call it, is absolutely the best hero in the game. And you can fight me if you want, but I'm pretty sure I'm right about this. Regardless of what the meta is right now, he was the best hero about 2 months ago, 3 months ago, 4 months ago, and I do believe he's going to continue to be one of the best heroes in the game for a very long time, which is crazy because he used to be one of the not best heroes, one of the worst heroes in the game actually. Now he's definitely a hero that if you don't have maxed out, get off your ass and get it done, because you will love having him on your team and you will hate needing to go against him, especially if you're not used to seeing him on every single defense at level 80. You better get used to it, or you better figure out a way to mitigate the damage, because if you don't, he's just going to wipe you out before you even have a turn to make a move, especially if you pair him up with people like Serenity or people like Valken, or pretty much anybody actually, now that I think about it. Well, there you have it. There's our top 10 list. And since I know some of you are going to get really triggered by some of the heroes that were not on this list, I did have a couple honorable mentions I wanted to say. I made a little list here. Hold on, I can't see it. So I did make a tiny little list here just so that we could get these out of the way, so that those of you that have a special love interest with some of these heroes don't feel left out. One of the honorable mentions I want to say is Jinlei. I still think Jinlei's a great hero. I definitely see Jinlei still a lot in PvP. I'd say maybe like 20% of teams we run into have a Jinlei. He's just not as good anymore. Unfortunately, I miss him, but I don't miss being silenced all the time. He still works with people like Dagon. He does follow-up attacks. I've seen him used a lot more in that setup because the Dagon hit with a Jinlei follow-up can kill Archon before Archon gets to attack, so that is one way to use him. He's just not as much of a menace as he used to be, so I'd give him probably 11th place by the top 10. Now, the rest of these aren't really in any particular order. I do think Zulk and Malice are still decent. I don't think they're bad. at all. I think they're just as good as they used to be. I just think that the top 10 heroes that are the new top 10 are just better than them. Malice has been used a lot on defense because she does take away a energy if an enemy dies. So like people have been using her with Dagon, not really with Zulk, but on defense they've been using her with Dagon to try and ruin against some of those Archon attack team plans. Thrax is pretty decent. I didn't like him at first, but he's okay. He's on certain teams he can be fine, but more than anything he pretty much just makes it really hard to kill the team. But he's not very good at making sure that the other team gets killed, if that makes sense. So he's more so annoying than anything. Like I said, he's hard to kill, but he's not like all that deadly himself. Next is Valken. I do think Valken's really, really good. Valken does a lot of damage, but Valken's main purpose right now is just to make sure that he takes out, that he adds extra attack and viability to Dagon, who's already ridiculously strong. So all he does is really make the number one hero a little bit stronger, which has value in itself. Like I said, I don't think he's bad, but I don't think he's that amazing. Craw is surprisingly decent nowadays. Craw got reworked, as most of you know, and he can be made really, really tanky. Starting with 3 stacks of foresight is always really, really helpful, so he's not that bad, and quite a few of my guildmates have been using him in one way or another, so he's got to be okay in that regard. And last but not least, I do want to talk about Sun Wukong and Solaris. I'm so happy that Sun Wukong is actually decent because I do think he's really, really fun to use. I use him a lot in PvP as long as there's not a Grand Guild tourney going on, because it's not the fastest attack team ever, but it is fun. He's a little bit unpredictable because sometimes his clone jutsu thing works, sometimes it doesn't, and you gotta really use him with Solaris, I feel, in order for him to be effective. I don't think you need Leo or any other beast really, but I do think that you pretty much need to use him with Solaris for him to be an upper echelon type hero. So those are pretty much the only ones I want to talk about. If you are wondering about other heroes, make sure to go check out my tier lists. They're still pretty up to date. I don't really have any opinions on the new spirits yet. So if you're wondering about the blue spirit and that purple spirit that just came out, I don't have any opinion on them yet. I don't have them start up enough. From my preliminary testing, they didn't seem that great. They seem okay, but they're nothing to write home about. And Gretel is probably the newest hero, and I think Gretel is very, very meh and very mediocre in my opinion, but she does make Mikko better, so I guess something, but nothing that deserved being anywhere even near the top 15. I do think these honorable mentions I mentioned are better than her. Anyways, that's gonna be it for this video. Like I said, please leave a comment, let me know what you think, let me know if you agree or disagree with me. Please leave a like if you liked the video. Make sure to subscribe, turn on notifications, and I hope to see you at the next video or at the next stream. Adios.